In any PvP game, you have a meta, and that meta is divided into smaller metas based on what environment you're in. One such form of categorization is the average skill level of the players. Depending on your rank, you can have a widely different experience in terms of who you play against, what works, and what doesn't. From a balance perspective, this makes tuning a champion's power budget more complicated than it looks. People tend to complain about how X or Y champion can go for so many patches without receiving any nerfs, despite having a win rate of upwards of 53% and a pick ban rate to complement it. Most of the time, that's because said champion performs worse in other ranks, and in the spirit of fairness, they want to give every player, regardless of elo, the opportunity to play that champion. Down in gold, silver, bronze, and iron, there's a handful of champions that perennially dominate the meta, taking advantage of the weaker coordination, mechanics, and matchup/game knowledge of the average player there to garner more success than they otherwise would against more competent ones. Often referred to as pub stompers or noob stompers, champions that are commonly viewed as useless or troll picks up in Diamond, Master, Grandmaster, and Challenger have the exact opposite reputation on the other end. My content is based on the perspective and circumstances of high elo and above, as that's where one can infer the true extent of a champion's practical capabilities. But I find this to be a curious phenomenon worth talking about, since it ultimately does pertain to champion and game design. For today, we'll be taking a rather off-kilter look at some noob stomper champions and how they're so dominant in low elo. Pub or noob stomping is present in more than just League, of course. There's no official definition for it, but just by looking at the term, you can draw the conclusion that it entails bullying noob or low-level players. By the way, going forward, I'll be using the two interchangeably. Anyways, pub stomper champions behave conceptually the same way as pub stomper players. Just as there exist members of the cast who demand a higher overall understanding of the game and better mechanical execution such as Kindred, Kiana, and Draven, others perform better the less their opponents know about them and the game as a whole. It's most pronounced up in top lane, where its isolated state implies you can get away with a lot more than if you had a jungler or other teammates intervening, but there are noob stompers in every role to some extent. With how ambiguous of a term this can be, let's start off by giving a brief overview of who might be considered a noob stomper. Bear in mind, this may not include every potential candidate. Up in top lane we have Kayle, Dr. Mundo, Nasus, Garen, Alawi, Yorick, Mordekaiser, and Malphite. In jungle we have Jarvan IV, Nocturne, Fiddlesticks, Evelynn, Amumu, Rammus, and Shyvana. In mid lane we have Malzahar, Aurelion Sol, Fizz, and I guess we can include Vladimir. For bot lane we have mainly Misfortune, I can't think of anyone else, and finally in support we have Soraka, Xerath, Zyra, and Sona. The reason top and jungle have more pub stompers than mid and bot is due to there being more outside influences down there. Junglers are more likely to gank mid or bot compared to top, and bot lane is a 2v2 lane, therefore it's hard to draw the line on who performs better in lower elo. We're gonna further categorize the aforementioned champions into two types, matchup checks and time checks. Matchup checks are pub stompers that exploit their opponent's knowledge of threat windows, ranges, and lane conditions, in this case lack thereof. These champions are incredibly dangerous if you don't know what they do, but can lose a lot of that danger if you are privy to what their win conditions and avenues of attack are. They're typically, but not always, lane bullies or champions with a strong early to mid game. While they fall off late game, low elo players don't know how to punish them or prevent them from snowballing. Time checks, if it wasn't obvious, are pub stompers that benefit from the average game length being measurably longer, thus making it more likely for them to reach their power spikes, which also means that the enemy team lost their chance to shut them down in time and are scaled out of control. A pub stomper can obviously be both a matchup and a time check, they're not mutually exclusive. If you were to take away only one thing from this video and nothing more, that would be the TLDR reason for why noob stompers are so strong in low elo despite being borderline trash in high elo. They take advantage of the lack of knowledge of the average player. By the way, I'm not saying this as an insult that gold, silver, bronze players are stupid and incapable of knowing better. Many low elo players simply don't care enough to invest that much time and effort into the game, and take it from someone who lost his soul trying to climb, you're not missing out on much, but I digress. That's the long and short of it, but the interesting thing is that matchup checks exist at all skill levels. One of the highest win rate junglers in Diamond Plus is Rek'Sai, who for well past a year at this point has had a win rate of like 53% or higher. Given her early game nature, it would seem counterintuitive for her to be so much more dominant in high elo when logic dictates players up there would be more aware of how to prevent her from snowballing. Conversely, there are some champions in low elo who you'd think would be a lot stronger in high elo through their higher macro and skill ceiling. The more you know about the game, the better they should be, yet they aren't. In a way, it's self-contradicting and hard to pinpoint who should be where, but I have a few theories that more clearly differentiate who is and isn't a noob stomper. Let's take a look at one of the most iconic low elo killers, Nasus. Virtually non-existent up in high elo, you'd be lucky to go half a dozen games without seeing at least one of him in gold and below. Nasus is in some ways both a matchup check and a time check, but there's a common misconception that he's at his best in the late game after accumulating enough stacks. It's easy to think that way. The more damage his Q deals, the more he heals too. Wither and Spiritfire are percentage based, meaning they become more gold efficient debuffs the longer the game goes on for, and Fury of the Sands deals percent health damage. But I personally believe his best point is in the early to mid game during laning phase. Over the past half decade, to help him deal with the more consequential early game, Nasus has gotten a lot of concessions that make his early game pretty dang devastating. For example, in 12.19, the attack speed cripple went from 50 to 75% of his slow. In 10.22, they made it so you get your resistances immediately instead of over time. In 10.7, they gave Wither an increase in cast range, and Spiritfire more armor and reduction at rank 1, which is important because you max that out last, so you get more bang for your buck early on. And in 7.15, they made it so when using your ultimate, your Q cooldown gets cut in half. These changes over time gave Nasus veritable early game kill pressure against players that don't respect him. He tends to outsustain most champions, and by level 9 with only like 100 stacks, he can put up a decent fight. The reason he falls off late game despite theoretically getting stronger is that all of his DPS is concentrated on a single target, and in teamfights it's a lot easier to gang up on him. Low elo players give Nasus too little respect in lane and too much respect in the mid to late game, which works in his favor. Essentially, Nasus is a noob stomper because in the early game, it's more likely for him to chase a kill or two against a careless player, not because he gets more time to stack, although that does play a part. Being a stat checker, he can snowball on his opponent really hard with even one kill above them, abusing the 1v1 nature of top lane to build a massive lead, and then abuse the more chaotic teamfights to single out one target at a time. Up in high elo, not only do players know how to bully him in lane, but in the off chance he survives to mid game with a good number of stacks, people know how to play around him a lot better. In general, most stat checkers are noob stompers. It's black and white with them. They either outstat you or they don't. And with how straightforward people play in gold and below, that's the perfect situation for champions like Nasus, Mundo, what have you. Now, let's take a look at a not so stat checky champion like Malzahar. Malzahar is one of the few champions in mid lane who performs significantly better in lower ranks than above. If memory serves, in gold he has almost a 52% win rate, but in diamond 2 or higher he has only a 48. Now you could make the argument that he's also stat checky given how simple his combo is, but that's not why he's a noob stomper. In fact, his ultimate has nothing to do with why he's a noob stomper either. Malzahar's stronger in low elo because he's at his best when playing the neutral game. For those unaware, neutral entails a game state where neither player has a situational advantage over the other. If you're attacking, that's called advantage state. If you're being attacked, that's called disadvantage. Neutral is when both champions are in a position to attack or defend. Naturally, anyone with long-range poke tools or the ability to exert pressure from a safe distance have good neutral games. Malzahar has a pretty lousy advantage and disadvantage. He has neither the means to pursue fleeing opponents, at least not after expending Nether Grasp, nor the means to escape from attackers. Therefore, the best game state for him to be in is neutral, where he can continuously push waves, harass the enemy team with space aids and Q, etc. As mentioned before with Nasus, low elo players have a very poor understanding of enemy threat ranges and threat windows, leading to scenarios where they either give too much respect or not enough respect to their opponent, typically at the wrong times. In the case of Malzahar, they respect his ultimate too much, especially assassins and marksmen. A lot of people are scared to walk up or sometimes attack him out of fear of getting ulted, even though it's highly unlikely that Malzahar does enough damage to beat you 100-0 unless he's Gigafed. To elaborate, let's look at the dynamic he has with Qiyana. In Silver, Malzahar has a whopping 58% win rate against Qiyana, he demolishes her. But in Diamond, he has a 44% win rate against her. Another one is Kassadin. In Silver, he has a 54% win rate against Kassadin, but in Diamond, Kassadin might very well be his biggest counter. The pressure of most neutral-oriented champions is psychological. They give more credit to an opponent than they're actually deserving of. One would think the best way to beat Malz is to pick someone with high enough range to stay away from him, but despite being the champ known for making someone on the enemy team useless, Malzahar actually struggles against melee champions the most, who can rush him down and kill him quickly, or put him in a bad spot where even after he ults them, they can just finish him off as soon as the suppress wears off. Same applies to Aurelion Sol. Sol is very neutral-oriented, more so than before with his new Fire Breath and Black Hole. He also has a fantastic advantage state with Astral Flight, ensuring he keeps up with retreating enemy champions, but he doesn't have a good advantage state, which is why assassins and rushdown champs annihilate him. Once again though, people overly respect him in low elo, giving him a smoother transition from early to mid to late game where he then destroys everyone. It doesn't have to be offensive pressure either. Sona and Soraka are two of the best supports in gold and below because hardly anyone exploits them. They're also very neutral focused, poking you down with Q while healing their team. Even if you pick an engaged support like Blitzer or Mumu, your AD carry may not know how to capitalize on it fast enough, giving Soraka and Sona a free ride through laning phase to get items and start turbo healing everyone. They miss their chance to shut them down and let them reach their late game power spike. So in the case of Nasus, they don't give enough respect and think they can just bash their face against him and he dies, while in teamfights they don't know how to play around him. In the case of Malzahar, Sol, Xerath, Misfortune, Soraka, Zyra, Sona, they often give too much respect and don't apply enough pressure out of fear of retaliation, even though all 7 of them have terrible disadvantage states, so they unknowingly play into their hands and get poked down and harassed all game and then lose. There's one final aspect of noob stompers that make them more effective in lower elo, poor macro sense. Amumu and Rammus are two of the best junglers in low elo despite not being very good in high elo. They have good clear speed and some of the most brain-dead ganking in the game, but they're at their most vulnerable when being counter-jungled due to their poor dueling capabilities, so they're at their most comfortable when not being invaded on, which I suppose in this case could be the jungler's version of disadvantage. If nothing is happening between either jungler and they're both farming camps doing their own thing, that's neutral. Ganking a lane or counter-jungling would be the advantage, and having your lanes ganked by your opponent or being counter-jungled on would be disadvantage. This is also why Rek'Sai dominates high elo. She's one of, if not the best predator jungler in the entire game and one of the best skirmishers as well. She loves to fight and can track you down with her tremor sense, making her exceptionally proficient at hunting down the enemy jungler. People don't counter-jungle nearly as much as they could be in low elo, giving otherwise easy targets like Rammus, Amumu, Shyvana, and Lilia plenty of time to farm and/or gank. Ironically, predator junglers like Rengar, Kindred, Rek'Sai, and Elise have awful win rates in low elo since they don't counter jungle or skirmish enough, and for them, it's crucial to do so as they're not really the best in 5v5 or fighting in open lanes. They take advantage of the element of surprise to shank you. That could be a result of being too afraid to walk into enemy territory or the option just never crossing their minds, but it's a big factor to why the jungle meta is so different between low and high elo. Up in top lane, the best macro noob stomper is Yorick. Yorick is a really bad champion, always at the bottom of tier list in Diamond Plus. It's super easy to shut him down early game, and frankly there are far better split pushers than him. I would consider Camille, Jax, Fiora, or Tryndamere more viable in this regard. Not saying Yorick's tower pressure is bad, no one shuts down towers faster than him, but split pushing viability doesn't boil down to how fast you take down towers. Anyone can do that with a few seconds of free time in the late game. It's how time efficient you are that matters more. Yorick is too slow, he has no mobility and he can't rotate very well either. This works in low elo where players are less decisive. They either hesitate too long on a decision, or everyone just does their own thing instead of working together to close out the game. Those bits of delay buy Yorick enough time to push a lane or get to wherever he wants to be. In high elo, people are quicker on the draw. If they see Yorick down in bot lane, Baron is gone, 100%. Or they're faster to rotate and punish him. Comparatively, Camille, Fiora, etc. are way faster. They can get in position and strike down a tower within seconds, unlike Yorick who has to slowly walk down a lane. Moreover, they can get the hell out of there or run through the jungle to get to Baron or dragging quickly once the enemy team took the bait and send people down to respond to them. If Yorick split pushes, he has to commit to it and can't move elsewhere on the map at a moment's notice without teleport. So he takes advantage of the lengthier response time in low elo to get his job done, since people don't realize how slow he is and punish him by taking something else on the map. Noob Stomper champions garner a reputation for being unreasonably strong in lower elos by mainly utilizing the lack of knowledge and confidence of the average player to get away with more than they should. But naturally, the higher up you go, the more aware and cognizant people are of those tricks, and they seldom, if ever, let that happen, forcing those who still play Noob Stompers in Diamond Plus to figure out more inventive ways to exert pressure. In almost all my videos, I look at things from the perspective of high elo for that very reason. It's too easy for a champion to look stronger or weaker than they actually are when you get away with more things. At the same time, it's intriguing to see the difference in game environment between Gold and Silver and Master and Diamond. What do you guys think about Noob Stompers? Do you think they're overrated or underrated? Let me know in the comments down below. That's gonna be it for today though, so if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other champion discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.